The sun sat heavy over Perdition Gulch, bleeding red light across the dust-cracked ground and baking the wooden bones of the town until everything creaked like it was in pain. Flies buzzed lazily through the heat, swarming around the broken porch of the general store where no one dared step outside. No one ever did when the Meyerwood gang rode in. Just beyond the town's edge, where the dead grass gave way to scattered mesquite trees, and the rocks stood like scorched tombstones, Clara Dade knelt in the dirt, wrists raw from the coarse rope binding her to the twisted trunk of a tree. Sweat clung to her temples. Her dress, blue cotton, torn and dust-caked, hung in strips from her shoulders. Her breathing came in short, quiet gasps, but her eyes stayed wide, watchful, unblinking. The gang lounged nearby, like they had all the time in the world. Jed Meyerwood, tall and lean with teeth stained tobacco brown, leaned against the saddle horn of his horse and let out a chuckle that grated like sand in a skillet. "Little bird thought she could just walk on through our land," he said, flicking his match to the dirt and lighting a cigar. Didn't even ask permission. Clara didn't flinch when the match landed near her boot. Behind him, Deke and Virgil took turns spitting tobacco juice onto the hardpan, trying to outdo each other. One of them, she didn't know who anymore, they all blurred together in her mind, had torn the ribbon from her hair and now wore it like a trophy tied to his belt. "She ain't said a damn word since we grabbed her," said Deke, crouching down and waving a hand in front of her face. "You think she's deaf. Or just stupid." Clara blinked slow. Dust clung to her lashes. "She's thinking," Jed said with a smirk. "Probably praying somebody comes riding out of that heat haze to save her like in one of them dime novels." The others laughed. A low, cruel chorus that rose into the dry air and twisted among the branches. "But nobody's coming," Jed continued. "Ain't nobody that stupid. Sheriff in this town couldn't pull a trigger with both hands and a written manual. And the rest," he glanced toward the cluster of buildings behind them, "they'll watch from their windows, same as always." And they did. In the shade of shuttered windows, men and women held their children close and said nothing. Behind cracked glass, old hands trembled as they gripped rusted rifles they no longer had the courage to raise. Perdition Gulch had seen what happened to those who stood against the Meyerwood gang. Graves outside town bore crosses without names. Clara's mouth tasted like iron and dust. Her lip was cracked from the back of a hand she never saw coming. Her arms had long gone numb, but her mind raced, not with panic, not with prayers, but with memory. A porch swing creaking in the twilight, coffee that smelled like pine smoke, a pair of calloused hands lifting her from the saddle and setting her on the ground, saying, "Asterisk, you stay behind me now, girl. Always. Asterisk." Her voice was dry, but when she spoke, it was steady. "He's coming." Jed tilted his head. "What was that?" Clara raised her eyes, slow as the sun climbing the canyon wall. "He'll come for me." A hush settled over the gang. Not silence exactly, but something cautious. A hesitation. Jed squinted at her, his smile curdling. "Who?" Clara's lips curled at the corner. Not a smile, not quite, but something sharp. "The butcher." The words dropped like stones into a well, rippling through the gang's laughter until it dried up altogether. Deke let out a snort, trying to break the sudden tension. "She talking about that ghost story? That old war bastard? He's been dead 10 years, if he ever existed at all." "Yeah," muttered Virgil, shifting uncomfortably. "Then why's her voice sound like she believes it?" Jed waved them off with a scoff, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. The butcher. Even saying the name out loud felt like inviting death through the door. Clara looked past them now, beyond the canyon rim where the heat shimmered and bent the air into wavering ghosts. Her voice, low but clear, held no fear. "He doesn't leave anyone behind." Jed walked up to her, standing just close enough for his shadow to fall across her face. "Well then," he said, drawing a knife and turning it lazily in his hand, "we'll leave your bones out here for him to find. See if he still cares." The knife hovered near her cheek. Clara didn't blink. Behind them, a dust devil twisted up from the earth, coiling between the rocks like a warning. Jed stepped back, eyes narrowing. "We'll let the coyotes finish her," he said finally. spitting in the dirt. "Leave her tied. We got real work to do." One by one, they mounted their horses. Clara listened to the hoofbeats fading toward town, to the rattle of their laughter stretching thin against the wind. She didn't watch them go. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the bark, breathing slow, deep. She wasn't praying. She was waiting. And somewhere, across the flats and the shadowed ridges, where vultures wheeled in the sky, a rider was already turning toward Perdition Gulch. The butcher was coming. Evening fell on Perdition Gulch like a drawn-out breath, dry, uneasy, and too quiet. The sky bled orange at the edges, casting long shadows that crawled across the sand. As the sun dipped behind the red canyons, a lone rider crested the ridge, framed by the light like something risen from the bones of the land. His horse was as worn as he was mud-caked, ribs showing beneath a battered hide, but still proud in its step. The man atop it rode straight-backed, his frame lean, angular, like it had been carved by wind and war. A long duster coat trailed behind him, gray with dust and time. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but his eyes caught the light, sharp and yellow like a hawk's. The kind of eyes that didn't look at a thing, but through it. No one greeted him. Doors stayed bolted. Curtains trembled once, then stilled. The town was practiced in silence, its people trained in the art of stillness whenever death passed by. The rider moved slowly down the main street, the creak of leather and the rhythm of hooves the only sounds in the dead heat. He passed the sheriff's office, where the windows were dark and empty, past the general store, where a sign swung lazily on one chain. Stopped just short of the saloon. He dismounted without a word, boots stirring dust that swirled around his ankles. The saloon doors creaked as he pushed them open. Inside, the air was stale with sweat, smoke, and quiet fear. A piano sat unused in the corner. 4 men sat at a card table, hands frozen mid-play. The barkeep, a man with a paunch and nervous fingers, stared at the stranger like he might be the first drop of a coming storm. The stranger walked to the bar, the worn wooden floor creaking beneath each step. He didn't sit. He didn't order. He just stood there, still as stone, scanning the room like he was memorizing every detail. The air tensed with his silence. "You lost, friend?" the barkeep finally managed, voice cracking. The stranger didn't answer. His eyes had settled on the wall behind the bar, where a row of wanted posters curled at the edges. One of them, more recent than the rest, showed 6 rough sketches under the words, "Meyerwood Gang, dead or alive, $600 each." The stranger stepped forward, slow and deliberate. From beneath his coat, he drew a long, thin knife, no shine, just cold iron. With a quiet thunk, he buried it in the wood, pinning the poster to the wall through Jed Meyerwood's sketched face. The knife quivered for a moment, then went still. No one moved. Even the flies seemed to pause. "You know him?" someone at the card table ventured, trying for bravado, but falling short. The stranger didn't look at him. He just said, "Where's the girl?" The room stayed quiet. The barkeep cleared his throat, glanced toward the window, then back. Heard they dragged someone out past the old mesquite grove. Left her tied. Said she was trespassing. The stranger nodded once. Just once. Then turned toward the door. "You don't want to go out there, mister," someone muttered behind him. The stranger stopped, one hand resting on the doorframe. "I heard he's dead," the card player continued, softer now. "That butcher from the war. The one they talk about. Shot through the neck in Abilene. Or maybe it was Kansas. They buried him. I swear it." The stranger turned just slightly, enough for the light to catch the edge of an old scar that crawled from the corner of his jaw down into his collar like a claw mark. His voice was quiet when it came, rough and cold. Then he must have clawed his way out. The saloon doors creaked again as he stepped into the dusk. Back inside, no one spoke for a long time. Out on the street, the stranger looked to the horizon, where the light bled away into bruised purple and blue. The mesquite trees stood out there like black veins across the landscape. The wind stirred again, carrying with it a whisper of something metallic, gun oil maybe, or blood. He walked back to his horse, untied the reins with practiced ease, and swung up into the saddle. The beast turned without command, hooves crunching through the gravel as they made their way back toward the outskirts. Behind him, in the dying light, the knife in the bar wall still trembled. The fire crackled low beneath the canyon ledge, hidden from the wind and sky. Elias Vain sat in its flickering light, boots planted firm in the dust, hat resting beside him like a discarded crown. The stars above blinked down without warmth, and the desert whispered secrets only the lost could hear. His fingers, wrapped in scars and silence, cradled a tarnished locket. It had been years since he last opened it. Tonight he did. Inside, faded by sun and time, was a sketch of a woman with hair like black silk and a smile that reached inward. Beside her, barely 5 years old, stood a little girl with a stubborn chin and the fire of the high plains in her eyes. Clara. His throat tightened, not from grief, but from the weight of everything he'd once dared believe he could protect. 10 years earlier, the man who bore that name, Elias Vain, had come home from war with nothing but a rusted saber and a heart too heavy for peace. He tried to bury the rage beneath a quiet life on a patch of land north of San Marcos, where the mesquite trees whispered lullabies and the world felt whole again. His wife, Anna, had planted herbs in a clay pot by the window. His son, David, had ridden an old mule like it was a stallion. They laughed like they'd never heard gunfire. Then came the Barrow Creek riders. Drunk on blood and stolen whiskey, they burned his house while he was out hunting game. When he returned, all that remained were blackened ruins and 2 small, charred bodies beneath the chimney stones. He didn't scream, didn't cry. He carried their bones to a place the wind wouldn't reach, and he laid them there beneath a marker of stacked stones. Then he took his saber and broke it on the fire. That night, Elias Vain died. The next morning, the Butcher of Texas rode into legend. One by one, he hunted the riders. From the border towns to the Colorado line, he moved like vengeance wrapped in dust. Men told stories of finding corpses hanging from cottonwoods with their own spurs driven through their eyes. Others whispered that he slit throats in the dark and left coins over their eyelids for the ferryman. No gang dared speak his name without glancing behind them first. It took him 13 months. When he was finished, he didn't celebrate. He vanished into the high desert, leaving behind nothing but fear and a silence too deep for memory. And then, years later, there was her. Rachel Dade hadn't known who he was when they met, just that he'd come into her life like a winter wind, quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. She was a widow with a girl barely 10, trying to run a failing ranch and hold her grief together with calloused hands. Elias helped fix a busted fence post one day, stayed to help her tend a sick horse the next. He stayed for 4 seasons. And in that time, Clara stopped being someone else's child. He remembered her clinging to his leg the first time thunder rolled across the plains. How she wouldn't sleep unless she knew he was on the porch, shotgun in his lap. He remembered the way she'd sneak out to sit beside him, silent, both of them staring into the dark like they could hold it back together. But the butcher never truly left. Men recognized him. Once, a bounty hunter showed up. Elias buried him on the edge of the property and told Rachel the man had slipped trying to cross the creek. She didn't ask questions. But one night, he saw her staring at him, really looking, and he knew. She'd figured it out. So he left. No goodbye. Just a note by the hearth, next to the locket. Asterisk, you'll be safer without me. Asterisk. Now, as the firelight painted shadows across the canyon walls, Elias stared at that same locket and felt the cold bloom inside his ribs again. The girl tied to a tree outside Perdition Gulch wasn't just Clara Dade. She was the last thing in the world still tethered to whatever was left of his soul. He stood. Every bone in his body protested. His back ached. His knees creaked. He was older now, slower maybe, but the flame hadn't gone out, just buried. He walked to the far end of the canyon, where a twisted rock outcropping jutted from the earth, like a broken finger. Beneath it, under 3 feet of packed earth, and 1 stone marked only with an X, lay the past. It took him an hour to dig. When his shovel hit steel, he paused. Let the weight of it sink in. Then he pulled it free. The rifle was wrapped in oilskin, still clean, still deadly. Beside it, a revolver with 6 notches carved into the grip. His coat, thicker than the one he wore now, lined with leather inside for knives, maps, and whatever else war required. Last of all, a silver badge pitted with rust and blood. It bore no name, just a shape, the same X that marked the grave. He dressed in silence, the wind picking up behind him, carrying whispers down the canyon walls like voices of the dead. The weight of the guns on his hips felt like memory. A coyote howled in the distance. He cinched the belt tighter. The butcher didn't ride for vengeance anymore. This time he rode for love. The desert at night was a living thing, breathing, whispering, hiding secrets under its sands and behind every crooked tree. Somewhere beneath a pale, fractured moon, the wind slithered between the mesquite branches, rattling them like dry bones. In the space between gusts, there came the sound of boots pressing into dust. Steady, silent. The first man died with his back to the world. He'd wandered out from camp to the old water, well behind the saloon, mumbling to himself about whiskey and women. His name was Tom Kinney, known for gutting ranchers and laughing through it. He leaned over to rinse his face and never saw the figure step from the shadows. A flash of steel, the faint gasp of air, and the gurgle of blood into his mouth as he fell forward, eyes wide, throat carved clean. The next was Louis Bishop. He thought himself safe in the arms of a brothel girl, belly full of moonshine and pride. When he stirred from sleep sometime before dawn, he saw a shape in the corner of the room. Not a man exactly, too still, too quiet. He reached for the pistol under his pillow, but the shadow moved first. When they found him in the morning, the whores said he died without a sound. Knife in the heart, clean as a needle. The window still open, the candles still burning. By the third death, the Meyerwood gang stopped laughing. They circled up at their canyon hideout, backs to the fire, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every bush and ridge. Deke swore he saw something in the trees. Virgil claimed he heard his name whispered on the wind. Jed Meyerwood, always the loudest, barked orders and slapped fear out of his men like it was mud. But his voice cracked when he said it wasn't the butcher. Said that man was long dead. No one answered him. By the fourth night, half the gang was gone. Elias moved like a shadow made of memory and resolve. Every step was a measure of control. Every breath a piece of the life he used to live. The world shrank to sound, snapping twigs, shifting gravel, the click of a hammer drawn back too soon. He used it all. Patience wasn't a virtue to him. It was a weapon. He stalked them through the scrublands, through dry creek beds and ghost trails only the oldest maps remembered. When he fired, it was once. Always once. He left no notes, no warnings. Just the bodies. At dusk, the fifth man fell with his face buried in the fire pit. No time to scream. His revolver still holstered. Jed stood at the mouth of the canyon, knuckles white around his rifle. Smoke from the campfire rose behind him, thick and acrid. Storm clouds brooded on the horizon, purple and swollen, the kind that seemed to watch from above like judgment. Who's left? Jed demanded, eyes wild. Just me, came the voice. It was calm, ragged, gravelly, but calm. Elias Vain stepped into the firelight, dust trailing behind him like a veil. His coat moved with the wind, half-buttoned, the edges stained with the road. The rifle in his hand hung easy, like it belonged there more than it ever had at his side. 6 men remained. They moved quickly, fanning out, rifles raised, boots scraping stone. Elias didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stared at Jed. Through him. "You're supposed to be dead," Jed said, eyes narrowing. Elias blinked once. "You were supposed to be men." Then everything exploded. Thunder cracked as the first shot rang out. Elias ducked low, rolled behind a fallen wagon, and fired once. A scream. One down. Gunpowder bloomed in the air, thick as the storm clouds overhead. Lightning split the sky. Elias moved like he was part of the wind, disappearing behind rock, reappearing in shadow, his rifle barked sharp and fast. A second man fell with a hole through his chest the size of a fist. The third didn't even see the blade before it slid between his ribs. Jed's men fired wildly into the dark, panicked, shouting over each other. One turned to run. Elias dropped him before he'd taken 2 steps. Now it was 3. Then 2. Rain began to fall, not heavy, but sharp, cold, like the land itself wanted to cleanse the blood. Elias's breathing slowed as his revolver clicked empty. He stood in the middle of the camp now, soaked, eyes locked on the last gunman across from him. They stared at each other a moment. Then Elias stepped forward and raised his knife. The man's hand trembled. He dropped his gun and ran. Elias didn't chase. Jed watched from the ridge, lips pulled back in a snarl, teeth bared like a cornered wolf. He held his rifle close to his chest, the barrel shaking. "You don't know what you're doing," he screamed. Elias walked toward him through the mud. "You tied a girl to a tree." Jed backed up, step by step, eyes darting for an escape. "She was nothing. Just bait. That's all." Elias raised his knife and pointed it at him like a judge handing down the sentence. "She's the only thing I've got left." Jed turned and ran, boots slipping in the wet dust, breath loud in his throat. He scrambled up the rocks and vanished into the dark. Elias didn't follow. Not yet. The storm roared overhead now, wind thrashing the canyon, rain hissing in the fire. He stood there, surrounded by bodies and smoke, and looked up into the black sky. For a moment he saw her. Not the Clara tied to a tree, but Clara as she once was, barefoot in the tall grass, arms outstretched, chasing dragonflies, calling his name like it was the only word she needed. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the butcher was gone. Only Elias remained, and Jed Meyerwood still had a debt to pay. The sky hung low, sagging with storm clouds and the last threads of twilight, casting the land in a bruised, uncertain light. The wind whispered through the mesquite branches, tugging at the torn edges of Clara's dress as she swayed, barely conscious, arms limp in their bindings. Her skin was pale now, lips cracked, eyes fluttering open only to roll back again. Blood had dried at the corner of her mouth, and each breath was shallower than the last. She had stopped hoping, but not stopped waiting. The sound of hooves broke the stillness, clumsy, fast, reckless. A rider burst from the trees, not like a rescuer, but like a man running from something darker than anything ahead. Jed Meyerwood dismounted hard, staggering slightly, wild-eyed, shirt torn, lip bleeding. He looked different now. Less a wolf, more a dog with a thorn in its paw. "Well, well," he muttered, catching his breath as he approached Clara, voice ragged. "Still here. Ain't that a sight?" She stirred, tried to lift her head. Her eyes found him, blurred and blinking, but when she recognized him, something inside her hardened. Even now, even with nothing left to give, Jed crouched before her, holding her chin between dirt-streaked fingers. "Your friend's Real, ain't he?" he rasped. "The damn butcher. He's out there. He killed my men like they were bugs. Ghost or not, he's coming, and he wants you." He stood, pacing, the storm wind whipping at his coat. "So here's what we'll do. You're going to be bait again, just like before. He'll show. And when he does—" Clara spat in his face. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jed froze, slowly wiped the spit away with the back of his hand, his jaw clenched tight. For a second, he looked like he might strike her, but something stopped him. Or maybe someone. Boots hit the dirt behind him. Jed turned. Elias stood under the twisted mesquite, shadowed and silent, soaked from the storm. The knife at his belt was gone. In its place, he held a revolver, low and steady, pointed straight at Jed's chest. The two men stared at each other in the flickering light of distant lightning. Thunder rumbled like war drums in the hills behind them. Jed laughed once, dry, bitter. "Course it's you." Elias said nothing. "You never did die, huh?" Jed sneered. "I figured maybe Kansas, maybe some bastard finally got lucky." "You were the lucky one," Elias said quietly. "You were the only one I didn't find. You think this is justice." Jed shouted, arms flung wide. "You think killing me changes a damn thing." Elias's eyes narrowed, voice like gravel. "You murdered my wife. Burned my boy. You don't get to ask about justice." Jed blinked. The wind died. For a heartbeat, there was no storm, no sound, just the two of them, caught in a decade's worth of silence. "I didn't know it was your farm," Jed muttered. "We were drunk. Stupid. It was supposed to be a warning." Elias's jaw tensed. Jed took a slow step forward. "You want this to end? Fine. Draw. No tricks. No showmanship. No countdown. They moved at the same time. 2 guns lifted. 2 hammers clicked. 1 shot rang out. Jed stumbled, eyes wide. Blood bloomed across his chest, dark and fast. He tried to say something, anything, but the words died in his throat. He fell to his knees, then face first into the dust. Elias didn't move. His hand lowered slowly, the gun still warm in his grip. He looked down at the body for a long moment, face unreadable. Then he turned to Clara. She was barely conscious, eyes glassy, lips trembling. He moved to her, cutting the ropes with a pocket blade, catching her as she collapsed into his arms. Her weight was feather-light, like holding the last remnant of something sacred. "Clara," he whispered. Her head lolled against his shoulder. He gathered her close, lifting her carefully, as the storm finally broke open above them. Rain fell hard, washing away the blood, the dust, and 10 years of ghosts. And still, he held her. At dawn, the wind carried the scent of blood and rain across Perdition Gulch. The sun rose pale and reluctant, casting long, golden beams through the canyon like it was afraid to shine too bright. The storm had passed, but it left the world quieter than before. The kind of quiet that settles after judgment has been delivered. The first body was found near the livery, strung up by the wrists, blood dried black on his collar, a note nailed to the post above his head, scrawled in a hand that was neither rushed nor proud, just final. Let this be enough. The second was sprawled in the street, arms folded across his chest. His gun belt had been left on his corpse, untouched. By the time the townspeople stepped fully into the light, they'd counted 6. All Mirewood men. All dead. One of them, Deke, had been left right outside the sheriff's office. His boots had been removed and placed neatly beside his head. Another message pinned to the door, you knew. The sheriff resigned that morning, packed a bag, and left before noon without a word. No one stopped him. At the edge of town, just beneath the church steeple, a woman with a scar on her cheek lit a candle and whispered something no one could hear. Others followed her lead. They didn't speak the butcher's name aloud. Not yet. But the fear that had once paralyzed them began to twist into something else, something older. Reverence. Awe. They didn't question who had done it. They knew. In a modest ranch house 2 miles from the center of town, Clara Dade woke to birdsong and linen sheets. Sunlight spilled through the open window, warming her arms and face. She sat up slowly, her muscles sore, her throat dry, her memories fragmented like shards of stained glass. The last thing she remembered was rain, and arms catching her, and a voice calling her name like it still mattered. A kettle hissed in the kitchen. Someone had been there. A half-eaten biscuit sat on the table. A fire still glowed in the hearth, but the room was empty. She called out once. No answer. Her boots sat by the bed clean. Her ribbon, the one that had been taken from her, was folded neatly beside them. She stepped outside, blinking against the morning light. There were no horses in the corral, no footprints in the dirt, only the silence of a man who had already gone. From the top of the canyon ridge, the wind sang through the stones like it was mourning something ancient. Far below, the town shimmered beneath a veil of dust and early light. Elias Vain sat astride his horse, the leather reins loose in his fingers. His coat fluttered at the hem. His face was turned not toward perdition, but toward the horizon, where the desert stretched out into forever. He said nothing. He left no note, no trail. The legend was all he allowed to remain. As his horse turned and began its slow descent into the haze, the dust rose to swallow him whole. One hoof step, then another, then nothing at all. He didn't look back. He never did. Some say he was a ghost. Others swear he was the devil himself, come to collect a blood debt written in fire and bone. But the girl knew one thing for sure. He was the only man the devil was afraid of.